Hello and welcome to Lansing's Pulse. I'm Ken Miller, joined as always with City Administrator Tim Vandall. It's cold this morning, it's hard to get going. The last few videos that we've done with other folks and with Tim as well, we started out masked up, but we have noticed that audio quality when we do that, keep the masks on, is reduced. So we're going to go ahead and remove our masks. We are 6 feet apart. Just so that you know, we are practicing safely, doing interviews, so appreciate you hanging in there with us. So Tim, let's start off. The City Council and staff made the decision this week, and we're recording this on January 15th. So on January 11th, city offices reopened to the public. I think we've been closed since late November. It's been a while in terms of walk-in public traffic. Of course, we've all been here working, but it's just that the doors have been locked so that folks can't come in. Talk a little bit about what went into that decision to reopen when we did.
Yeah, well, we tried really hard to keep an eye on the trends of what had been going on in Leavenworth County for the last few weeks. And I know we really wanted to keep a close eye on those trends after the holiday season, after Christmas, after New Year's. We wanted to make sure there weren't any significant bumps after that. And while the numbers really didn't go down after that, they didn't spike significantly either. So that made us feel pretty good about reopening. The other thing too that we'd had a little bit of feedback on from one of our council members was trying to be at least somewhat consistent with USD 469, the school district. And the school district had met all of their metrics to reopen, and they reopened with all of their students, I believe, on January 4th or 5th. So that made us feel a little bit better about reopening city facilities. But a couple things I should mention. This isn't a blanket policy. There's still no open gym. There's still curbside only pickup at the library. So there are still areas where we're really trying to be safe with how we're doing things.
I think it's important to also add, we are still wearing masks in the building. We are still practicing social distancing.
Yeah, staff is still wearing masks whenever we can. So yeah, absolutely. We're trying to be safe. We're trying to be responsible with how we're doing things. But we felt like this would be a good gradual step. So if people are needing to register their dog, they can come in and do that. Or if people are needing to pay their sewer bill, they can come in and do that. But we did feel good that the numbers hadn't spiked significantly, so we felt okay about doing that.
And it's all COVID all the time, and I think if you've watched these interviews, at least 75% of what we talk about has something to do with the pandemic. The city did make the decision to move forward with spring soccer registration in January. Looks like we're also going to make a run at baseball, softball, t-ball registration. I think that's going to start in March. Again, if numbers don't spike again. To the extent possible, what do you think is going to happen with the city's traditional public events? We usually have a spring, I'm going to call it spring, it's usually in May. It used to be called Lansing Days. There was a barbecue contest. Everything is transitioning, but we're still looking at having the events, correct?
Well, yes, we are. And first off, you'd mentioned soccer and baseball and t-ball and those things. We feel really good about holding those events this year. We were able to do soccer last fall, and we felt like that went really well. And just in very general terms, I think we feel better about holding events outdoors rather than indoors. So we feel really good about soccer this spring. I know we're already planning ahead on how we can safely have baseball and t-ball and softball this summer too. And hopefully by the time the summer rolls around, more people will be vaccinated as well. Regarding our other events though, it's going to look different. It'll probably look different this year. But at the same time, last year, we were able to hold that fishing derby. Mm-hmm. We had to limit our registration a little bit, but we were able to hold the fishing derby. We were able to have our fireworks. We didn't have people there, but we were able to have fireworks. And actually, it was kind of neat when we had our fireworks last year. We had some compliments from people that liked that when it was in town, they could see it from their front porch, or they could hang out in their backyard. So a lot of people kind of liked that. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that those events might look kind of similar to how they did last year. But like we talked about in the last section, we're going to be keeping an eye on the trends to make sure that we're not holding an event in the middle of a major spike. We definitely don't want Lansing to become the next Lake of the Ozarks.
Right.
So we're going to keep an eye on trends. We're going to make sure if we do events that we can do them safely. And the safety and health and well-being of our citizens is the number one priority for everything we do. But I will say again, we feel pretty good about holding those events in some fashion this year.
And I think you would agree with this, but when we had to change events, and you mentioned fireworks, where instead of having it out at Bernard Park, we had it kind of, I guess it was around north of town center, but that we weren't gathering in one spot, but you could watch it from a backyard or drive your car and park in a parking lot. We got a lot of good positive feedback, very little negative. In fact, I don't even remember any negative feedback. It was all positive.
Yeah.
Then you take, for instance, when we did our Halloween trunk or treat.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it inside the gym because it wasn't safe. So we did it where people just stayed. We got a lot of positive compliments about that. And, it just goes to show, and I'm not just complimenting city staff and the city council, but also the residents of Lansing and anybody else who showed up at those events. It actually turned out pretty good, and I think we all feel very fortunate that it did so.
It was important to the city council and also to staff to have as many events as safely as possible as we could, and that's what went into that. A lot of planning went into transitioning the fall festival and the Spooky Center into one event, and a lot of planning went into that. A lot of planning went into the fishing derby. A lot of planning went into the fireworks. But again, it was important that we hold events and try to have some sense of normalcy in the midst of what's going on. And we felt like we did pretty good with that.
Right. Here's a topic that we've broached, I think the last couple of times we've met. We meet about monthly to do these video interviews. CARES Act funding. We've had several items. I think you've received all the money, or the city has received all the money from the county that we were supposed to get, and all of these projects are in process. Talk about an update there.
There's a lot of projects that we've been working on with CARES Act funding. The first one that I'll mention, we'd mentioned a couple minutes ago, Parks and Rec software for registering kids for events. This was something that we utilized CARES funds for. The goal there was, if you're registering your kid for soccer, baseball, whatever, you can do that from the comfort of your home rather than getting up and waiting in line at the Parks and Rec building and touching doorknobs and being exposed to people. We felt like that was a good use of CARES Act funds to make it a little bit easier to register your kids for events. We're working on a digital sign right now, right by City Hall, and we'll be making public announcements regarding health issues, whether that's vaccines available at a certain location at a certain date, or just reminding people to wash their hands, or if there's a certain city event that's canceled or moved because of the pandemic, we can make those announcements on that digital sign and hopefully hit 25,000 people driving back and forth on K7 every day. So we felt like that was a worthwhile expense for COVID funds. The other thing that a lot of citizens might not realize, we've made some pretty significant improvements to our council chambers with CARES Act funds, and this is kind of a twofold expense. First off, we made improvements to the technology infrastructure in the council chambers to improve the quality of the videos for council meetings. So that way it makes it easier for folks to watch council meetings at home or on the internet, so they don't feel like they need to come to City Hall to watch what's going on in their local government. The other component of those council chamber improvements, we had all of these old padded chairs from the 1990s in the council chambers, and you couldn't really clean them. They were very difficult to move and social distance. So we were able to get newer chairs with wheels that can roll if we need to social distance. They're easier to wipe down. They're not fabric or anything like that. So that was another component of the improvements that we made to the council chambers. We also purchased a lot of new cleaning equipment and supplies to clean our city facilities. One thing anyone who's cleaned a bathroom knows, when you're wiping something down, you've got to get, around the stool and behind it and all of this stuff. We purchased this equipment so people can clean the bathroom and kind of stay a little bit further back.
Less risk to the cleaner.
Less risk to the cleaner in terms of COVID, but also less risk in terms of spraining your knee or hurting your back or something like that too. So that was another positive thing that we had purchased. We were purchasing updated water fountains for all of our city facilities, so we don't have
Touchless, right?
touchless water fountains, but I think they're also compatible. If you've seen those water fountains where people can put water bottles underneath it and it'll fill up a water bottle for you. Another thing that I'm really excited about is the new touchless scanner over at the library, so people can check out books themselves. You don't necessarily have to go up and wait in line to get your book checked out. It's a touchless scanner. And the other thing that I'd say too, and this is more of an overarching thing, when we were evaluating different items to spend CARES Act money on, we tried to be very intelligent about how we did it. We wanted to purchase items that could be used even after the pandemic was over, and that's why the library item is beneficial. We talked about how the bathroom cleaning supplies make it so it's less likely to hurt your back or sprain an ankle or whatever. So a lot of these things that we had purchased, they're beneficial even after the pandemic is over. The final thing that I want to mention too, though, because we do have feedback once in a while, and people will say, why are you spending money on this? This isn't the most intelligent thing to spend money on, whatever. And I get that. It was the CARES Act funding rules made it so everything that we spent money on, it had to be related to COVID. We couldn't just go out and buy police cars, buy snow plows, or lower taxes or something like that. It had to be related to COVID. So that's why all of these items, they have to have some type of angle to fight the pandemic a little bit, whether it's encouraging teleworking or something like that. There has to be some type of COVID relation there to it. So we weren't able to just go out and give random money to businesses.
And I think governmental entities from the federal government on down, county government too, have made it clear they're going to be audits.
Yeah.
In fact, I think there is an ongoing audit because whatever we spent money on has to be reviewed by other government entities.
That's exactly right. And at the very outset of this process, I think it was maybe early in the summer, I was on a conference call with some people in Topeka, and they had talked about that very thing. And one of the things that they had mentioned was it just takes one city to purchase something inappropriate. And it makes the whole state look bad. Yeah. And we didn't want to be that city. Yeah. We didn't want to be that one random city that purchases XYZ item that has absolutely nothing to do with COVID, and then all of a sudden every local government ends up with a black eye. So we were very careful to make sure that all of our items specifically related to COVID, but also that they would be beneficial even after the pandemic is gone.
All right. From a city development perspective, despite the COVID-related economic downturn, things here seem to still be moving pretty well. To the extent that you can, talk about some of the specifics, and you've mentioned these in the past, obviously. You've got Harbor Freight, you've got a new car wash that is being constructed as we speak. It's not a secret anymore, and it probably was the worst kept secret about McDonald's as well. There are things happening here, and probably more quickly, or multiple things happening that we haven't seen in years here in Lansing. Despite COVID, we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's been a pleasant surprise to see so many things moving forward and continuing to move forward, even in the midst of this pandemic. Right out that window over there, we can see that new mutual savings building being built right next to Petro Deli, and that's going to be a beautiful addition to the K7 corridor. That car wash that you had mentioned a few minutes ago, it's fascinating when you drive by that. Folks who drove by it 6 months ago remember how low that property was, and they really built that property up with a retaining wall and a lot of dirt there. So it'll be fascinating. That'll be on the same level as Quick Trip. But beyond that too, you look at that intersection right there, and you think about what it looked like 5 years ago with the Aldi that hadn't been updated for 20 years, the co-op, which was a great business, but it was a dated building. And now you look at that intersection, you've got a brand new updated Aldi that, it looks like those Aldis in, Johnson County or
Right.
something. It's a sharp looking Aldi. You've got that brand new Quick Trip. You're gonna have a brand new car wash back there too. That intersection just looks fantastic. So we're very excited about that. I don't have a date for when that car wash will be open. We're hoping late spring or maybe early summer, but we don't have a definitive date yet. Harbor Freight, that was approved at the Planning Commission level a while back. Right now, I think we're doing our final review of their building plans. We are hoping they will break ground maybe this spring or early summer, but again, we don't have an exact date on that yet. And the other thing too, I mean, there is still a pandemic going on.
Right.
There's still, uncertainties with the economy, so who knows if things are going to be delayed or not. But we're incredibly excited about Harbor Freight, and we think that's going to be a great addition to Lansing. Regarding access to that, the access point for Harbor Freight will be off of Connie Street. So there wouldn't be an access point off of K7. And that's something we sometimes hear about from citizens too. But what folks have to remember, when a state highway is basically your main street, any entrances and exits have to be approved by the Kansas Department of Transportation. And I know from a safety standpoint, they don't like a significant number of driveway accesses off
Rear
of
end
K7.
accidents.
Yeah, exactly. So the main access, they're the only access point for Harbor Freight will be off of Connie Street. You'd mentioned McDonald's, and that's another one where we really don't have a specific timeline, but it was nice to see, we have some rules in town center, some covenants that said, any type of, I think, drive-through restaurant or something needed to be approved by the city council in advance. So that's why that's a little bit more public now. They needed to get the city council's approval before they could submit everything. So that's why I want to say at a council meeting in October or November, the council took that up and approved having that there. You'd mentioned how it was the worst kept secret. Obviously the franchisee had owned that property for years and years, and he still owns it. But we're really excited about that. I know they want the economy to be in full swing by the time they open. They don't want to invest millions of dollars in a new McDonald's restaurant and have it only be 50% capacity.
Right.
So that's why we really don't have a timeline for when that will open yet. But it was nice to get that out there a little bit more when they applied to have a drive-through restaurant in town center. So even in the midst of all the pandemic issues going on, it's been really great to see so much economic development happening in Lansing. And the other thing too, that a lot of folks realize if they drive up and down K7, we just purchased the town center property as well. That's going to be a great investment for Lansing. We hadn't owned it for the last, we had never owned it. It had been owned privately for the last 15 years, and obviously it sat vacant for 15 years. The city's asking price is a little bit more reasonable than the previous owner's asking price. And it was really neat. Within the first few months of the city owning that town center property, we had 2 people contact us right away. And they weren't, I guess I should clarify too, it wasn't, these 20-acre stores or something like that. It was businesses that wanted to purchase smaller parcels, but still businesses wanting to make, $1 million investments in Lansing. That gets us really excited.
Right.
So we feel really good about the future of Lansing and our commercial corridor up and down K7. It's healthy and it's thriving, and we feel really good about it.
Right. Okay, let's wrap up. There has been renewed talk in fulfilling some of the projects from the most recent Parks and Rec Master Plan update. And I think the council's talked about this. I know at staff level, certainly you and Jason have. What's the latest as far as Parks and Rec, and when are we going to get some of the bells and whistles that we've been hearing about?
Yeah. Well, the master plan was completed in February of 2020. And, obviously we completed it, and then the pandemic happened. And there were a lot of, question marks with finances and what it would do to our tax revenue and things like that. Obviously here we are 11 months later, and we feel better about where we're at. We feel like our tax revenue has stayed strong and in some cases improved. So we feel pretty good about that. So based on that, the council did give us the thumbs up to go ahead, put out a request for proposals to engineers, and we're hoping to have the improvements designed in the next 6 months and maybe let it out to bid in late fall or early winter, maybe in 2021. Some of those bells and whistles that you're talking about, long term, we want all of our baseball fields out at Bernard Park. Long term, we want to make some pretty significant improvements to the soccer fields out there. Obviously, if we have baseball and soccer out there, we're going to want a more permanent restroom structure, permanent concession stand structure. So there's a lot of things that we want to see improvements out at Bernard Park. If there's money left over, if we get a good bid, we also had some folks talking about maybe a nice little splash pad or something out at Bernard Park. But we're excited about that, and we think we have the funding capability to do it. The thing that folks need to remember too, why this project is, it'll be a little bit more expensive than maybe people realize, there's no utilities out there.
Right.
There's, water is still across the street, so we're gonna have to get water lines in, and if we wanna irrigate our baseball fields that we're gonna be investing hundreds of thousands of dollars on, we're gonna need to have irrigation lines to all of those baseball fields. So there's going to be a lot of utility work that's going to come into it. There's currently no electricity out there. There's currently no sewer out there. So there's a lot of things that we'll have to plan for while we're making those improvements to Bernard Park. The other thing that we had talked about too with our Parks and Rec master plan, we didn't want all of the improvements to just go into one location that was 3/4 of a mile outside of town. We wanted to make some improvements in town too. So one of the things that we're looking at is a destination splash pad in Lansing, in City Park, east of the highway there. That's an area where there's already a parking lot, there's already a small park there, and there's utilities nearby. So that's one of the things the city council had talked about a little bit, was a nice splash pad there. So we're looking at a lot of different improvements that we can do. We think it'll be around $5 million, and hopefully we get good bids on that. The other thing that's really nice, right now, this is a great time. If you're going to be incurring any debt, now is a good time to do it.
Right.
We issued debt when we had to purchase Town Center, and I want to say our interest rate was under 2%. So it's certainly a good time. If you do need to incur debt, now is a good time. And it's also a good time to get really fantastic bids. So we feel really good about making those improvements to the Parks and Rec master plan. We're looking for bids to be let late fall, maybe early winter of next year. And hopefully we'll get some of those bells and whistles some of our citizens have been hearing about for a while.
All right, I've been speaking with City Administrator Tim Vandall for Lansing Pulse. I'm Ken Miller.